Hello and welcome to our little discussion panel in regards to COP26. With me today I have a few guests to discuss some very interesting questions. We have Anton, a student in natural sciences, Elena, a student within public health, we have Thea, representing the social sciences, and we have Rachel as a student in political sciences. For the first question, I'd like to start with you, Anton. What are the real climate issues affecting Sweden right now?
Thank you, Sandra. So Sweden, being a subpolar region, we have a little bit of the Arctic amplification in the northern parts of Sweden, which means that the temperature rises that we're experiencing are levered here in the northern parts. This leads to snow cover melting and shrinking glaciers, which in turn disrupts the local water cycles of the northern parts of Sweden. These temperature rises also impact the heat patterns. So heat waves has become more frequent in recent years, and for example in 2018 we saw severe forest fires in the northern parts of Sweden, causing huge damage to the local ecosystems and the local communities.
Thank you. Do you want to add something to this, Thea?
Yeah, for a long time now, climate change has been a prominent issue in Sweden, having a massive attention from politics, but also a lot of media coverage which have framed it as a social problem which requires a collective effort. Swedish society is a climate conscious and increasingly working on individual level to reduce the impact. But however, there are some social groups in Sweden, like the Sami indigenous community, the homeless, and even women, who are more vulnerable as a result of the climate change.
Thank you. That actually brings it over to the second question. What are the wider implications for Sweden affected by climate change? Do you want to add something on this, Elena?
Yeah, well, as temperature is rising and we are seeing a lot more heat waves, this has a great result for health problems, especially for sensitive populations like the elderly. This will also mean a great risk for injuries related to extreme weather, like floods, falling trees, etc., as well as a higher chance of disease spreading and caused by fungi, bacteria, or those transmitted by insects.
Thank you. Speaking of health issues, what impact has the COVID pandemic had on Sweden's approach to the climate emergency? Rachel?
Thank you. I worked in a cafe before and we experienced a food shortage due to COVID. And I think this shortage just created an opportunity for both people in the country to rethink and to shift to be more self-sufficient, not only for future pandemic but also for the climate. And it's all over the world. During the pandemic, people just work from home, so they do not need to commute as usual. This also helped to reduce the usage of fossil fuel in transportation needs, both in Sweden and in the whole world.
Thank you. Then we move on to the next question. What are the specific elements of Sweden that have contributed to the climate emergency? What do you think, Anton?
So Sweden has a history of being very industry heavy. Our economy is very reliant on heavy industries such as forestry, mining, and large industrial scale production like Volvo trucks, for example. And this has pretty much been run on fossil fuels in the recent years, which has significantly contributed to Sweden's greenhouse gas emissions. I also think that the lifestyle patterns and consumption has a huge impact. For example, the average Swedish consumes about twice the global average in meat, which has, it leads to methane emissions from livestock, for example.
Well, thank you, and thank you all for the answers so far. Moving on to question number 5, how do you think climate change will affect Sweden in the future, both positive and negative? Would you like to begin, Thea?
Well, the disruption of the grasslands of the reindeers due to the climate change have affected the social structures of Arctic Scandinavia. This will lead to migration, and there will be a new pattern never experienced before, which will endanger the traditional knowledge and livelihoods of the indigenous communities of the Arctic region. While for women in Sweden, the main advantage is in relation to institutional support, which has major implication for building resilience for long-term climate change. And lastly, I would like to say that the climate change represents a prominent risk factor for further exacerbating of homelessness due to the lack of available resources and also limitation in the ability to respond to environmental disasters. This will lead to more chronic illnesses, physical exposures, and stigmatization for the homeless people.
Do you want to add to that, Elena?
Yes, well, the extreme weather conditions will also worsen the indoor climate. And in the future, we will probably need to adapt to intensive technology like air conditioning in order to safeguard human health. And this presents many drawbacks in the Swedish national strategy to become a zero emission country by 2050.
Thank you. Let's finish with the last question. What would you like to happen at COP26? Rachel?
Actually, we can all wait to see more regulations and agreements being proposed during COP26. And also, we think it's time to make people realize the urgency of climate change and take actions because the rising temperature won't wait for anyone. So we expect to see more ambitious from those developed and developing countries. And also, going forward, we are eager to see more inspiring cases and innovative technology which could help us to make the green transition and mitigate climate change, also for better build our societies and bring us more hopes.
Thank you. Do you want to add something to this, Anton?
Yeah, apart from what Rachel just said, I think I would like to see some more realistic targets and politicians really showcasing that they understand the boundaries of climate change and the boundaries of society that we operate within.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for participating today. I think and hope we walk away from this very short session a little bit more enlightened.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye!
Bye.